It often begins in moments that feel so ordinary they barely register as decisions at all, like replying to a message while your attention is split and only later noticing what you committed to, or agreeing in a meeting because the response surfaced faster than reflection, or choosing a familiar option on autopilot and realizing afterward that no real comparison ever took place. And in each of these moments, the experience feels smooth, continuous, and controlled, as if awareness were present and guiding the process from start to finish. Yet when you slow the moment down and ask yourself when the decision actually happened, the answer becomes difficult to locate because what feels like a conscious choice frequently arrives after the brain has already settled on a direction, forming quietly beneath awareness. And this silence is not absence, but orchestration. Because before intention ever enters the picture, the brain is already working to reduce uncertainty and prepare action, beginning with perception rather than deliberation, as sensory systems continuously filter the environment, reducing an overwhelming stream of information into something manageable by prioritizing what seems relevant based on context, familiarity, and expectation, while the thalamus silently coordinates this process, routing signals efficiently so that by the time anything reaches awareness, it already feels structured and meaningful. And this early filtering explains why familiar environments feel effortless, why routines unfold without friction, and why certain cues immediately stand out while others fade into the background. And as this filtered information moves forward, it encounters memory with the hippocampus supplying context drawn from past experience, quietly answering questions you never consciously ask, such as whether this situation resembles something you have handled before, whether a familiar response is likely to work again, or whether there is any real uncertainty present at all. And this is why a message from one person can capture your attention instantly while dozens of others barely register, or why one option feels obviously right while another feels strangely invisible, even when they appear nearly identical. And at this stage, nothing feels like a decision yet. It feels like perception itself. But beneath that perception, systems involved in learned behavior are already shaping the outcome, as the basal ganglia begin favoring responses that have proven efficient in the past, not because they are objectively superior, but because they require less effort to initiate, and this bias toward efficiency is subtle, presenting itself not as habit but as preference. Which is why repeating familiar behaviors rarely feels automatic. It feels intentional. And as this bias builds, predictive processes begin smoothing what comes next, with the cerebellum continuously anticipating likely movements, timing, speech, and adjusting actions before they reach awareness, making behavior feel fluid and reactions feel immediate. And this predictive smoothing creates a powerful illusion of control because when nothing interrupts the flow, it feels as though awareness is actively directing events in real time, even though the direction is distributed across systems operating beneath consciousness. And by the time you become aware that you are about to act, whether that action is sending the message, agreeing to a request, or reaching for an object, motor preparation has already begun, holding multiple possibilities ready so behavior does not pause while you think, because the brain prioritizes continuity over reflection. And this is the moment many people assume awareness takes command. But in reality, this is when the prefrontal cortex enters as an interpreter rather than an initiator, organizing what is already happening into a coherent explanation, weaving intention into behavior so that it feels authored and deliberate. And this explains why explanations appear so azali after the fact. Why you can justify a choice moments after making it, even if that justification did not guide the decision. And throughout this entire sequence, subtle monitoring continues, with the anterior cingulate cortex detecting small conflicts and adjusting effort when something feels slightly off, and the insula integrating internal bodily signals that appear as certainty, hesitation, or gut feeling, adding emotional weight without requiring conscious analysis. And when you finally slow down enough to reflect, the range of possibilities has already narrowed dramatically, leaving only a few options that feel reasonable, which makes the outcome appear obvious in hindsight. And this leads to a quietly unsettling realization that awareness does not always lead decisions. It often follows them, arriving once uncertainty has already been resolved, mistaking completion for control. And this pattern repeats throughout the day in moments so ordinary they rarely draw attention, shaping how quickly you respond, what feels familiar, and which paths seem available, setting the stage for a deeper layer that has not yet been explored, one where these silent choices begin to shape not just behavior, but the way you experience yourself, And this loop becomes especially influential in modern environments designed for speed and repetition. And you may notice this when you try to interrupt a routine, pause before reacting, or choose differently than usual, because effort suddenly increases, attention sharpens, and awareness feels heavier. Not because you are thinking more deeply. When this understanding is carried forward into the structure of modern life, the pattern becomes even more apparent, because the same silent processes that guide individual decisions also shape how attention moves, how motivation fluctuates, and how certainty settles in before it ever feels deliberate, especially in environments designed for speed, continuity, and minimal friction, where choices are rarely presented as clear pauses for reflection, but instead embedded within ongoing flows, like endless streams of information, interfaces that anticipate your next action, or routines that reward familiarity over exploration. And in these contexts, the brain leans heavily on prediction and learned patterns to maintain efficiency. As sensory systems rapidly assess what feels relevant, memory supplies, familiar interpretations, and behavioral systems prepare responses that require the least effort to execute, creating an experience in which action feels seamless and awareness feels present, even though it often arrives after momentum is already established. And this is why attention can drift without intention and snap back instantly when something familiar appears. Or why motivation can rise or fall without a clear conscious reason. Because beneath awareness, larger scale networks are constantly recalibrating priorities based on context, expectation, and internal state, shaping what feels engaging or draining before you consciously evaluate it. And these adjustments are reinforced by subtle neurotransmitter dynamics that signal salience and reward, influencing which actions feel worth pursuing and which feel easy to abandon, without ever announcing themselves as chemical processes. And over time, these silent influences begin to feel like stable traits, as if you are naturally interested in certain things, naturally indifferent to others, naturally confident in some situations, and hesitant in others, even though these tendencies are continuously being tuned beneath the surface. And this is where identity becomes less a fixed center and more a pattern maintained through repetition and explanation. Because once an action occurs, awareness steps in to explain it, linking it to intention, preference, or value, reinforcing the sense that you are the author of what just happened. And this authorship feels real because it preserves continuity, allowing experience to flow smoothly from one moment to the next without fragmenting. Yet recognizing this process introduces a subtle shift, because it reveals that what feels like control is often a form of alignment, where perception, memory, prediction, bodily signals, and narrative converge just in time to create coherence, not because awareness directed every step, but because it arrived in time to make sense of the outcome. And this realization does not remove agency, but reframes it, suggesting that agency is distributed across time rather than located in a single instant with preparation happening early, action unfolding fluidly, and understanding arriving last. And when this perspective settles in, it becomes easier to notice how similar patterns operate across trust, confidence, belief, and even the sense of self-continuity across days and years, shaping not only what you choose, but how certain you feel about those choices afterward, particularly in environments that reward speed and familiarity. And this awareness opens the story rather than closing it, because once you see how much of experience is guided quietly before awareness arrives, it becomes clear that the same mechanisms influence many other aspects of the mind, from how opinions solidify to how emotional reactions stabilize, subtly shaping everyday life while remaining largely unnoticed, inviting continued observation rather than final conclusions, as if the most powerful forces shaping experience are not hidden because they are inaccessible, but because they operate so smoothly that they rarely demand attention.